Welcome to the next installment of our exploration of human origins. Beings that we cannot see because they exist outside the visible spectrum of light possess amazing abilities. Among these is the ability to distort electromagnetic field. We can only see this in a digital recording. Solid objects appear distorted, and the image is heavily pixelated. For these spirits, or angels, matter poses no obstacle. Before we continue with our topic, let's go back to the Mayan relief. I'll show you something interesting. Notice the object the snake is holding. It is undoubtedly a scepter, a symbol of rule and power. In this illustration from the British Library, we see a woman on the left holding a book, presumably a Bible. She appears to be old and tired, and she is emerging from what looks like a tower. The tower is a symbol of the temple, our Earth. In the center of the illustration, we see two biblical beasts. The beast on the left represents the dragon, the biblical serpent with 7 heads. This signifies 7 spiritual beings. This beast stands on the shore of the sea. The second beast is a lion, and it too represents 7 spiritual beings. It symbolizes the transfer of power to the sun. One beast hands over rule and power over the world to another. That is the scepter in question. In this case, it is not clear who is taking over, but given that the woman is coming out of the temple, we can assume that the dragon is handing over rule to the sun. The lion then takes over rule of the world, and that is very good for humanity. The lion, a 7-headed beast, comes out of the sea. We can view this entire scene as the end of an era and the beginning of a new one, or as a shift in the world order. However, the third 7-headed beast is missing here, and that is the leopard or a similar animal, which can be seen, for example, in Mayan frescoes or in human form in Tutankhamun's tomb. Yes. The Maya called it a jaguar. In the Bible, the 7-headed beast is described as a 10-headed beast with 7 horns. That number doesn't add up, does it? I know Egypt, but give me a few more minutes. This illustration is correct. The beast on the right is a jaguar with 7 horns, that is, heads. We'll explain the horns later, but the heads are a reference to Kabbalah. The 7-headed dragon wears a crown on each head. He is the ruler of the world. The Kabbalistic tree. The Bible states that this beast has 10 heads, each bearing a name that blasphemes God. These are likely the 10 worst human traits, because the jaguar represents the dragon's extended arm and plays the role of the whisperer, or seducer, of humanity. And it is up to you how you navigate this life and resist its pitfalls. I'm almost certain that these people are the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes at the biggest corporations that control the media, the pharmaceutical industry, fashion, politics, and more. They dictate what you should think, how you should behave, and what you should buy. Isn't that crazy? In recent years, I've come to feel that the modern-day evil these beasts have concocted is the cell phone. People have stopped noticing the nature around them, the blue sky, and have become indifferent to everything happening around them. And it's all because of these little boxes with moving pictures. What kind of world is this, where your appearance matters more than your knowledge? And then there's this strange illustration of a snake-jaguar hybrid that, instead of the Kabbalistic 10 heads, has 10 bishop's mitres. What does that mean? A woman in a purple dress adorned with pearls and gemstones. I'm sure you're well aware of the church's dark history, so I'd rather not comment on it further. Let's finally move back to Egypt. Now, a little history. Pierre-François Bouchard, who discovered the Rosetta Stone, was a versatile and highly educated man. He studied philosophy, mathematics, descriptive geometry, and the construction of military fortifications. He was subsequently recruited by the War Office and assigned as a lieutenant to the Egyptian Expeditionary Force in 1798. He was placed with a group of mechanical engineers and tasked with studying Egyptian crafts and techniques. The French invasion of Egypt and Syria from 1798 to 1801 was a military expedition into Ottoman Egypt and Syria, led by Napoleon Bonaparte during the French Revolutionary Wars. The campaign's objectives were to disrupt British trade routes, expand French influence, and establish a scientific and administrative presence in Egypt. Don't you think there has always been, and still is, a great deal of political interest in the Middle East? However, this campaign had significant military, political, and intellectual consequences. Napoleon's presence in Egypt introduced a European-style system of government, but it also strengthened resistance among the local population. The scientific expedition accompanying the invasion produced Description of Egypt, a seminal work that laid the foundations of modern Egyptology. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone made it possible to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs. I suspect that this was precisely the reason for this military mission, which lasted only 3 years. Just as the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb was certainly no accident, there are no accidents. Jean-François Champollion was a French linguist and Egyptologist. In 1822, he became the first person to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs with the help of the trilingual Rosetta Stone. He deciphered the stone 23 years after it was discovered. When we consider that Jean-François Champollion was born just 9 years before this discovery, he was only 32 years old when he deciphered hieroglyphics. Was this man a genius? Take a look at the Rosetta Stone. Notice the uneven distribution of the text. The hieroglyphic script actually occupies the smallest portion of the stone due to damage. When deciphering an unknown language, the general rule is that the longer the text and the more different word combinations you have at your disposal, the more likely you are to identify patterns within it. The decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphs was made possible by the Rosetta Stone, which contained the same text written in 3 different scripts. Hieroglyphic script, Demotic script, and Greek script. There is one problem, however. This consensus is now under pressure. The last person who could actually read hieroglyphs died around 390 AD. After that knowledge disappeared completely, and the only thing that remains is the Greek script. Rome took power, and Christianity spread westward. Egyptian temples were either rebuilt or left to the mercy of the sand. Ancient scribes had no apprentices, and so there was no one to pass this knowledge on. The idea that hieroglyphs are symbols that are not read phonetically but interpreted. For example, a snake signifies danger, a circle signifies eternity, and a bird symbolizes the soul, was dismissed as romantic but impractical. And therein lies the rub, as we will see later. Science is still searching for the pronunciation, but not the meaning. Demotic script is a more common form of writing that was used primarily for legal documents. Greek served as the administrative language in Egypt during the late period. All 3 language sections were intended to convey the same message. The Greek section contained a formal declaration from 196 BCE regarding the donation of temples and tax breaks, simply the kind of text that governments produce in every country and at every time. Was a rather insignificant text carved into stone for all eternity? Because the Greek version was legible, something became possible that had not been before, comparing a familiar script with an unfamiliar one, side by side, symbol by symbol, word by word. For the first time in 1,000 years of fruitless translation, someone had a roadmap. Champollion drew on his knowledge of the Coptic language, and I personally have a strong suspicion that he used this approach to create an entirely new language. But let's move on, because what followed was starting to get much more interesting. What was the stone really telling us? Once the hieroglyphs had been deciphered and scholars had translated the entire text, the results were utterly anticlimactic. No hidden wisdom, no lost teachings, no secret rituals. The Rosetta Stone was, in and of itself, merely a bureaucratic note. A bureaucratic note carved in stone for all eternity? After 200 years, the case was closed, and museums began displaying the tablet. The Rosetta Stone was valuable as an artifact, but utterly unremarkable as a document. Everyone had read it and translated it, yet a 21st century algorithm uncovered something that 200 years of human research had completely overlooked. The algorithm did not agree at all with the notion that the text was indistinct. Artificial intelligence enters the picture, and a systematic computational analysis of the Rosetta Stone texts begins. The researchers expected either confirmation of the existing translation or random noise. It turned out that the discrepancies between the texts were not random. Rather, the Greek texts differed in meaning from the hieroglyphic passages. Some passages in the hieroglyphic text did not even have a linguistic explanation. Certain clusters of hieroglyphic characters relate to what is known as layered communication. For 200 years, it was assumed that all three texts were identical, but the AI model did not assume that. On the contrary, it considered all three texts to be completely different. What? It seems that only the temple priests were able to interpret these symbols, and that this information was highly sensitive and classified. And this secrecy apparently continues to this day. Many experts have expressed skepticism about the results produced by artificial intelligence. Many of them have refused to accept this fact. Throughout the long history of archaeology, the most significant discoveries have almost always begun with something that was not supposed to exist at the time. If every inscription were subjected to the same computational analysis in the future, it could lead to a situation where the entire history of Egypt and, by extension, of all humanity, would have to be rewritten. And that is certainly not what this system wants. Jean-François Champollion and Napoleon Bonaparte. There are things we are not meant to know. These are closely guarded secrets known only to a select few, the Freemason masters. Freemasons are the guardians of the most incredible secrets, the sudden revelation of which people would not accept or would not even want to acknowledge. People today view life differently, just as the system of this world has presented it to them for millennia. Such a revelation could come as a shock to the world. Are we ready? Let's take in this hidden knowledge little by little. Clues are all around us. And here we are, back at our cartouche. As we mentioned in the last video, this cartouche is said to belong to a pharaoh named Djedefre. The name Djedefre was read from this cartouche. If we look closely, we can see a snake, an erect penis, and a sun disk. Last time, we explained the meaning of the Djed. Men are referred to as walking Djed, while women are referred to as walking Ankh, or the cross of life. We also concluded that the sun, the earth, and the biblical serpent, the dragon that held the sun disk in its mouth, work together. The feminine orbs come from the earth, the masculine ones from the sun, but the serpent adds something to them that binds us to the physical body, our vessel. This is the true consequence of what is known as biblical sin, which we will also see in another Egyptian fresco. Actually, there are a lot of scenes like that, but it's still the same story told in several different ways. So here we have three symbols that, taken together, tell the story of humanity's arrival in this reality. And as I've mentioned several times in the past, ancient Egypt wasn't an empire of pharaohs, but rather a comprehensive biblical account of how we come into this world and leave it again. And not only that, there are even depictions of the end times, or a change in the world order, if you will. And since my half-hour limit is almost up, and I don't want to dive into another lengthy topic, I'll leave you with a riddle for the next video. Take a close look at this cartouche, especially the oval shape and what's on its underside. What do you think it might be? You can post your suggestions in the comments. That's all for now. I look forward to seeing you again next time.